Welcome to day 2 of 21 Days of Fear. And today we're going to be diving into one that's probably right in a lot of people's fields, which is the fear of money. And yeah, everything that encompasses within that. So lack, scarcity, there's not enoughness, all the things that come into this fear of money. And one thing that is super important to say and share on this topic that I don't know if people actually think of it this way, and it's super important to if we're going to shift out of these patterns of fears around money and things like that, which is that when we have experiences of not being able to pay the rent or stressing about how we're going to pay the bills or how we're going to put food on the table for the children or how we're going to pay for whatever we have coming up, when we have feelings like, oh, I wish I could do that, but I can't afford it, these are all traumas, right? These are registered in our neurology as a trauma. So we actually must look at the fear of money in the same way that we would look at how trauma imprints itself within our fields, within our neurology. And yeah, I actually don't know if I've seen many people think of it this way, and it's so important that we do, because then we get to understand that when we say are constantly stressing about money in our home and freaking out about how we're going to pay for our rent and things like that in our home space, if you saw the What is Fear call, you know that our brain takes the environment that we're in, and the environment that we're in when we experience a trauma becomes triggering for the fight or flight response. It becomes triggering for the fear response. So when we're constantly in our home having the trauma of not being able to pay our rent and all of the anxiety and the fear and the stress and the pressure, or not being able to pay for XYZ, or constantly stressing about money in our beds at night or in our home, wherever it is in our house, our brain then creates an imprint that our home is now triggering to our financial struggle, to our financial fears. So the moment that we are in our home, this fear gets triggered. And why this is so important is because in order to shift those memories around environments that are triggering to certain fear responses, we must recognize that that's what's happening to begin with and go in and rewire our neurology, rewire these pathways to create new biofeedback loops around our environment. Otherwise, it's going to be incredibly challenging to change our money story in the home that we have this trauma, or in our office, or wherever it is that we're continually going to and worrying about money or stressing or having conversations that there isn't enough and I can't afford this now, or I just don't have any money, and all the things that continue to feed into this fear around money. And really what we're getting to at the core, why does the fear of money imprint a trauma? Right? This is important to understand, is because when we're talking about money, we're talking about our survival, right? So when we're in this space of fearing money, we are fearing our life. We are fearing death. We push up against our deepest core survival instincts when we're talking about money. And whenever we're pushing up against our deep core survival instincts, we are traumatizing our internal compass. Right? We have these blanket statements around what trauma means, right? And that if we didn't go to war, or we weren't raped, or we weren't, robbed, or we weren't all the things that we perceive as like this grandiose version of trauma, that these little teeny tiny things that happen in our day, our stresses, our worries, they're influencing us and they're traumatic to our internal compass. Our brain just registers them in the same way it would register a massive trauma. So it's very important that we come to recognize this, because until we recognize this and actually go in and heal the trauma of the fear of money that is pushing up against our stories of survival, we're not going to see the change. And you might have had experiences where, and this might be something that maybe some of the entrepreneurs have experienced, where you enter into a new environment and all of a sudden you're able to create wealth, or opportunities come in this new environment because you're at peace, you're at ease. Maybe it's a cafe that you go to, or a library that you like to work at, or a co-working space that you really vibe with, that you go there and you're so distracted by the environment, it feels really good, so you don't think about your stresses around money there. So that environment doesn't have this imprint on this environment, we need to be afraid of money. And the fear of money blocks money, right? If we are afraid and talking like we don't have money, money's not going to come to us. It's just like you wouldn't want to go and hang out with someone who was saying you were evil, that there's not enough of you, that you XYZ or a bad person or aren't available, all the things. You'd be like, man, I'm not going to go hang out with that person because they don't see my worth. So when we fear money, we don't see the worth and value of money, and it's just an energy. It's not going to come to us, right? So you might have experienced this when you go to that space where you haven't had that fear around money, and you're able to magnetize these opportunities. Maybe you sign up clients and things like that, and then you go back home where you're constantly fearing money, and it's like you just shift back down into this space, and it's like, oh wow, this fear is back, and now my body's in fight or flight mode, it's in survival mode. And that's just one example of how we can recognize that this process is happening when we're imprinting fears into our programs, right? If we recognize that our brain is the quantum computer, our body is this magnificent computer system, that our consciousness, our spirit is able to it's like typing on the keyboards, right? So when we're programming in these various different experiences that are traumatic in some way, those programs stay locked in place. And it's very important that we recognize this in order to change them. So if we effectively want to actually stop the fear around money so that we can open ourselves up to our true infinite nature, where we are magnetic, where opportunities and connections and partnerships and resources and all the things for you to be sharing your gifts with the world are available, we have to go in and look at this fear of money from a space of it being a trauma, and how a trauma imprints itself within our brain, within our neurology, within our nervous system, within our reticulating activating systems, and go in and change it at the core, change the programs, right? So when we're talking about the fear of money, a big reason why the journaling and the affirmations alone and sometimes the meditations alone don't create those changes, or we see a momentary change, right? The momentary change comes and we're like, okay, cool, everything's groovy, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're back into this fear, we're back into this scarcity, there's no more money, and we're freaking out, and all the programs come back up. Because those journal prompts, they don't rewire our neurology. They don't go in and reset our nervous system, right? It's an externalized way of thinking about something that's internal, which is why in the Fearlessly Express program, we use various different technologies that actually know how to go in and reprogram our neurology and reset our nervous system and release the memories of us constantly being in the fear of money in our home or in our car or at our office or wherever it is in your space that that fear keeps coming up. Maybe it's in the online space, right? Maybe when you get online, you like see all these things that you'd love to attend, and you're like, oh wait, well I don't have the money for that. So the internet is constantly feeding back this information so that every time you then go online to connect with people, this fear around money comes up. And then it creates this tightness in your nervous system, so that what happens is your reticulating activating system has this program that says, when you're online, this belief that scarcity is real comes into the forefront of your awareness, so that the reticulating activating system only finds validation from the internet that will say, yes, this belief is true. Yes, you're going to be in the scarcity mode forever. Every time you get on the internet, that whole pattern kicks into place, right? So we have all these various different environments that we are feeding these beliefs, feeding these fears that will then keep us looping back into those fears over and over and over and over and over again, no matter how much journaling we do, because we have to go in and reprogram our computer, right? And if you think about your actual physical manifestation of the computer, right? The reason we are able to evolve, technologically speaking, our computers to the space that they're at today is because we internally have an advanced computer, right? The inner creates the external, right? So if something happens to your MacBook or to your Dell or to your HP or to whatever computer operating system you have, and it shuts down and you're trying all of the little hacks that you know how to do, the Control-Alt-Delete, the escape mode, the Windows button, whatever it is on a Mac. I don't use Mac, so I'm not sure what that equivalent of like Control-Alt-Delete would be on your Mac. You go to the security settings and you try to reset the computer, and like you do all the things that you know how to do, and that computer keeps crashing. It just keeps slowing and slowing and slowing until one day it just doesn't open. It doesn't turn on anymore. So what do you have to do? You have to take your computer to a computer programmer, someone who has studied and learned the intricate webbings of your internal software of your computer, that knows how to reprogram it in order to bring it back online in a new space without all the corruptions and data that have kept the computer like pulling in these viruses or pulling up all these pop-up blockers that are spamming, or being so slow that you can't get any, like you're typing and like 5 minutes later what you typed comes up onto the screen, right? It takes going to someone and investing in someone who knows how to reprogram these programs in order to then have a brand new computer. And it's the same thing with our internal computer. We must know how to reprogram it in order to have a brand new computer operating software that has returned to a space of purity, right? Which is where we all come from. And our role here now is returning to that space of purity, right? And fear brings us out of purity. Fear brings us out of resonance. It brings us out of harmony. It brings us out of balance. So in Fearlessly Expressed, we are working with the reprogramming. We are reprogramming these patterns, and it's why we have 21 Days of Fear, where we're talking about all these different ways fear shows up in our lives. Because all these different ways that fear shows up in our lives, there's one mode of reprogramming them, because it's the same operating system. And our body is taking it in. This fear is the same as this fear, is the same as this fear, is the same as this trauma, is the same as this trauma, is the same as this trauma, because the computer has a way of operating. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I'm keeping these videos short, under 15 minutes, because we're going live every day. If you have questions about Fearlessly Express and you want to join this amazing reprogramming program that gives you the technology and the tools and the practices and the one-on-one support, as well as the group community container, then please send me a message. I love to connect and share more with you about the details. I hope that you have an amazing day and that this information has served you in some way. Much love.